Welcome back to the X Podcast. You are listening to the sound of KGB 91.2.
Did you say KGB?
Just
What is this? Are you some Russian radio station now? KGB.
It came out because I was teasing somebody the other day. Did you ever see the movie Anna?
Yes, I did.
In 2019?
Wait, was that the? Wait.
It's just called Anna. It's the
was it?
There's another one. There's a few things similar.
Okay.
There's one just called Anna, and it's about a Russian.
Yeah, I did.
Supermodel turned assassin.
It wasn't a model though, or a movie. It was a series.
No, it was a
a series?
I don't know if it was a series.
I saw it. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
And I was with someone at that movie who was not sure what was going on. I was explaining to them about the KGB, and later on I said, now do you remember what they're a part of? And this person responded, yes, they are an important part of KFC.
Okay. KFC. Okay.
Anyways,
it's cute.
Yep, it was funny. Okay, so I don't know why I said KGB 19.2, but we are back, and you are angry.
I am not angry.
We had
outraged.
Yeah, outraged. We had an episode on outrage, and you mentioned towards the end that you have your own source of rage right now.
That's a little strong, maybe, but
and so I just thought we could turn this podcast table into a counseling table, a therapy table.
Ooh.
And you could process your emotions in the presence of God and friends.
I'm glad you added that part. I didn't know if you thought you yourself as God.
Oh no.
Okay.
No. Narcissism dies at this table.
Yes. That's right.
So
ideas are resurrected. Narcissism dies here.
That's right.
I love it.
This table is supposed to be a mirror, not a God. We're going off the rails.
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know either. Okay, so what are you angry about?
What am I angry about? Well, just as a follow-up so for quick context, if people missed the last episode, in there I made reference to a church's social media policy and you actually I made reference to another post. You added the one that they did on their social media policy, which is they do not use overtly spiritual language, insider language, maybe I could say it that way, when they do outside marketing. So whenever they're trying to reach people who don't go to church, they don't use really spiritual language. They try to connect with them on something that would be a reason that they would want to come to church. Doesn't mean they shy away from the gospel. Doesn't mean they shy away from talking about all things in church. And so people were, I guess, outraged by those. We talked about outrage culture, and one person commented that it's not even a real church or a social club if you don't talk about the crucifixion, the blood of Jesus, and Calvary, I guess in your posts or whatever. So it just made me think about something that's been annoying. I don't post about it when I get annoyed. I am not outraged by it when I get annoyed.
Are you triggered?
I usually just tell people like you or other people what I think about other people. And so
what I think about other people.
I do that in the safety of my counseling friends, right? So we get this is counseling, right? So we can do it. One of the things that I've just been maybe a little bit annoyed by more so recently is the amount of criticism that feels leveled at the church, not by the world or our culture. I get that at times. I think sometimes in the church we do stuff that doesn't make sense. I think sometimes the church stands for things that maybe is counter to what culture wants to buy or sell. And so I understand that we're going to take some criticism in that regard. And I think the church at times throughout the years has taken criticism for doing some bad things. And when that happens, justified. I get it, right? But I feel like I just feel like it's what's the phrase? It's open season. It's free range. It's almost feel like it's popular to just criticize the church at large. I think this has happened in a couple different arenas, a couple different pockets of within the church. That's what I think. And there's certain ones that bother me more than others. There are I think one of the things that I've seen the most, or that bothers me the most, are people who are, I would say, within the church. When I say that, they're within faith circles, who just feel like it is either their, we've talked about watchdogs before, of church and faith, but they feel like it is their place to just criticize and almost criticize different swaths of church experience, that almost like it just stigmatizes everybody that's in there. And I'll give you a couple different examples that just come to my mind. Some of this I want to be careful because it's not, I don't want to say this is reflective of all of generational things. But one of the things that I've seen is that as people that I know and sometimes have been surrounded by, not all of them, but that are older than me, sometimes it seems can be critical of the church of today. Where it's like it just doesn't match the way church used to be. I mean, it's kind of the way we all are when things kind of grow up and you kind of grow up and then new technology, new things happen, new methods, new whatever. And it's like, man, that's not church. You know what I mean? So there's that. I think there's some people that are just super critical where they just think the church is an absolute failure. That the church, when you see the culture of secularism increasing in our country, then it's the church's fault. The church hasn't made a stand the way it should. And that's why we're seeing all these things and so then we pull out all of our Old Testament passages. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and, and repent of their sin and pray, then I will heal their land. And so, it's everything gets turned back around on the church. It's the church's fault, the church's fault, the church's fault. I know the church is imperfect. I know our church is imperfect. I know the capital C church has had a lot of black eyes throughout the years. There's been a lot of leaders that have done a lot of bad things. But I feel like it's just maybe, again, it's just part of the narrative of what makes news and what makes headlines and what makes outrage is all the negative. And my perspective is I know so many pastors of churches, and some of the hate is really aimed, I want to say, at larger churches. Yeah. Probably always has been, but some of the hate has been leveled at large churches. Like there's all kinds of just opinions and things that are just, and they're all just clumped together, and it's like, oh, large mega churches, large churches, all they care about is this, all they care about is this, all they care about this. and I just know some of it is I'm in relationship with some pastors and some friends in ministry. A lot of them. We both have a lot of friends in ministry. We've been in ministry for a long time. That are amazing people, love God, love God's people, are, I would say, in church ministry for the right reasons, care so much about people. And so part of me just gets a little defensive and go like I don't know. It just feels like it just feels like it's open season, and you got social media. I want to say social media YouTubers that are out there that always it's like their job is to criticize this pastor and that church and these type of churches and, these churches, and they don't do liturgy right and they don't do this right. And it's like, it just, I don't know. I just kind of get annoyed by it. I'm like, most of the pastors I know of that are leading, whether it's small, medium to, I know a lot of pastors leading larger churches, they care. They care about people. And I think a lot of their churches are doing really incredible things. Yeah. Like life is coming out of it. New life is coming out of it. They're making a difference. They're giving away hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to invest in nonprofits and other agencies around their areas that are helping feed the poor. They're doing all this stuff. And none of that matters. None of that matters. It's just like stigma after stigma. And so I don't know. There's just... I don't know. Do you see it? I'll let you. I don't know.
No, I want to press you a little bit more. Okay. I'm not trying to make you name names, but let's, because it's been a thing for a while. So let's put a microscope on it. Let's get down. What are some things that are really vexing you? Let's get specific. That makes you annoyed.
Okay. Well, some of them I don't. Okay. Okay. Let me give some specifics without naming any names.
Sure.
One that really bothers me. Are people who are not practitioners, but always have a message of rebuke for the church.
So armchair prophets.
Yes. People that are, I've been writers. There's authors, people I know of that have just come out just slamming different versions of whether it's evangelicalism or the church in America or, Western church or whatever, that have just like, they have this nature of bringing rebuke to the church. And yet when I look at them and their credentials, I realize, A, they're not pastors. B, they don't lead a local church. Like, I think some of the things that's bothered me is the people who are not in the trenches, who are really trying to build God's kingdom through a local church, have a whole lot of things to criticize in the church, but they're not actually trying to make it better. They think they are by criticizing, but I have a really hard time receiving. And they might have some things that are right. And I can look at the church in America. There's a lot of things I can look at and go, that church needs to wake up. Oh, the church needs, like, we could say these things all day long and be correct.
Yeah.
But I just, there's part of me that is just like, I don't even want to listen to you.
Yeah.
And I know that's bad. I don't ever want to be that way. But it's like, you don't have face-to-face conversations like we do with the people that we are really trying to reach who are broken. And so until you understand what it's like to try to lead a church where there are the lost coming to know Christ, and they are brand new in faith, and they are really messed up in their lives, and there are broken, and there are addicts, and there are people who are coming, and their life is an absolute struggle, and their faith journey is messy.
Yeah.
Until you're in the trenches and you're figuring out how to really do stuff like that, I have a hard time listening to you. I don't think you're an expert.
Yeah.
Just because you have a criticism to level against the church at large.
Yeah.
That's an example.
Yeah. That's good.
What do you want to say in response? You want me to name names?
No, I just want to let you get this off your chest. I think there's a lot of layers to it. Like, I'm trying to
I'm not even talking about former pastors.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about other people. I'm talking about there's authors.
Yeah.
There are people who are social media known.
Yeah.
They're YouTubers, and they're just constant. All they do is criticize and say everything. They do it on like this, I feel like this guise of, it's the whole calling out apostasy. It's, I'm going to protect the church by exposing the wolves in sheep clothing, all this stuff. And I think a lot of them, I'll be honest, I do think a lot of them probably mean well. Like, their intent of what they're doing is, but from my seat, I have a hard time receiving anything that you're saying because of the way you go about it, or it's just, it doesn't feel helpful.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, because for example, it's easy to pick on I want to say very well known, nationally known large church pastors. They're in the spotlight. So I could list a few of them that are nationally known: Ed Young, Michael Todd, Craig Rochelle, Stephen Furtick, Bishop T.D. Jakes, just to name a few. You could probably add some more to that. Could probably add I'm just trying to think of who are some of the larger, Rich Wilkerson Jr., Levi Lusko. I'm just trying to think of who some of the, there's always,
I think there's a lot here. I think, number one, there's so many conversations inside this. There's the conversation of how we judge churches, and then there's a conversation of how we judge leaders. There's a conversation of whose place it is. When it comes to leaders, I do think, I heard someone one time nuance that verse where it says, "What you do to the least of these," and it talks about, if you really look at the language and the context, what he's really speaking to is anybody that you tend to dehumanize and speak to as if they aren't human. And I think for many people that's the poor, and for many people that's the well-known. I think whether they're a secular celebrity or a Christian celebrity, we tend to look and speak at them as if they're not a human. And I don't run in all the circles, but I do know a few well-known leaders, and I know a lot of people who are close to well-known leaders.
Yeah.
And, like I had a buddy that worked at Gateway and would host
Robert
these guys.
Morse.
Yeah. I mean, one of my buddies, he would spend a lot of time with these people, and several of my buddies there are close friends with these people.
Yeah.
And they would just tell me behind the scenes, Russ, you would just never believe the integrity, the kindness. There's people that you can look at and say, oh, they're just regurgitating cliches, or they're just whatever. They're just in this for this. And you just don't know them.
Yeah.
You don't know their heart. You don't know their family. You don't know their integrity. You don't know their character. So I think there's that. I did think there's also, it's really easy, tall poppy syndrome, to just pick on whatever's big and thriving and doing well.
Yeah.
And, and I also think there is a syndrome in which whatever you're furthest away from, you tend to categorize and stereotype the most.
Yeah.
If you live in Asia, you would see a big difference in Japanese people and Korean people and Chinese people.
Yeah.
And if you lived in one of those countries, you would see a big difference in all the people that are Chinese and that are Korean and that are. But if you don't live in one of those particular countries and you don't even live in Asia, you just tend to lump them all together.
Yeah.
We do that with everything in life, and people do that with a megachurch. But every megachurch is so different. First off, there's not even a defining
I hate
character.
that term.
There's not,
because I feel like it's become a negative term now.
it's become a negative term.
Oh, it's a mega church.
And there's not even a clear delineation of what makes a church mega.
I know.
It depends on your context, and it's relative.
Yeah.
And
some say 1,000, some say 2,000, and it doesn't matter.
And I can tell you there are quote-unquote mega churches in every denomination. And you take any two quote-unquote mega churches, and their culture may be completely different.
Yeah.
Their mission statement may be completely different. Their level of health or unhealth may be completely different. The way they do things is completely different. You just cannot lump things together by size any more than you can say all small churches are.
Yeah.
Or all medium churches are. It's just it's a futile exercise, and it's ignorant and it's demeaning.
Yeah.
And it doesn't play out well. And I mean, you could take several things. You could take friendliness. I've been to some small churches that are really really friendly, and then I've been to some really small churches that, to be honest, I know why they're so small.
Yeah.
I love what Rick Warren said. He said you can't really. He said it's almost impossible to get a big church if it's not friendly. He said in general, churches grow because they're friendly. I mean, we are so cheesy to say, but we're so blessed by the building that we're in.
Yeah.
But we do Welcome to the X once a month, where newcomers come in, 15 to 20 of them, and we ask the same question every time. What made you come back?
Yeah.
Not one of them has said the size of the building or the lights or anything fancy or usually even preaching or worship.
Whoa, wait.
Sorry.
Are you sure?
Are
you sure about that?
That's a knock on me too.
We got to ask.
I mean, they do say that, but the majority of the responses are, this is the friendliest place I've ever been.
Yeah.
I felt at home right away.
Yeah.
I got a card in the mail. I got someone that followed up with me. I got smiles and handshakes on the way in. I actually felt like this was a place that no matter where I was from, that's why people keep coming.
Yeah.
Yes, the preaching. Yes, the worship. Yes, people care.
Excellent.
People care that we do things with excellence. But I would say all those are the trapping. I would say all those are the skeleton. But I think the heartbeat is what people feel from people, and so that's just one small example. And it's just funny. There's somebody that actually goes here now, so I won't say their name. But over COVID, when we moved in this building, his wife was cutting my hair, and she's like, yeah, we just won't come because, he just feels like he just doesn't like mega churches. And, I was just being snarky. I said, well, tell him. She's like, oh, yeah, he hates mega churches. And so I was just being snarky. And I said, well, tell him he's going to hate heaven. It's pretty big. Yeah. And and they showed up the next week. Did they? They've been coming back ever since. And so sometimes snarkiness pays off. But I just think, so there's so many layers to this.
Sure.
I do think, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody that would play devil's advocate. There is a sense in which, depending on the level of critique, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm annoyed by the people that are self-appointed watchdogs.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm equally annoyed by somebody that just comes to church once every 7 to 8 weeks, isn't involved, doesn't serve, isn't invested, but just feels really entitled to always give their opinion, even if they don't give anything else.
I agree. And we have those too.
For some reason that can kind of, and so, but I'm trying to I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of, the truth is, I could walk into a Michelin star restaurant where a chef has been doing this for 40 years, but I'm still going to have an opinion. I might still have a critique. I mean, the hope is I would have a little bit of humility to know that this is his level of profession.
Mm-hmm.
He's a professional. I'm not. This is what he's doing. But I'm trying to like put myself in this, you know.
Do you think we need critiques?
I don't think we need critiques.
Do you think that it's helpful at times?
I would say, you know, we're comparatively to most churches a pretty open feedback loop church, not just in staff internally, but you know, externally. Like people will tell us how they feel about stuff. I think transparency and open loop feedback is good. Mm-hmm. I think it's not helpful in general when people have I think critique can be good. A critical spirit's never good.
Yeah.
And I think like it's just
but I think we both agree that a critique, okay, if you're a chef, right?
Yeah.
Use that as an example.
Yeah.
If you're a chef and the New York Times review critic or one of those comes in and gives a critique, you're going to care. Mm-hmm. You're going to, you're going to take it to heart. What was their experience? If you have somebody who's, never cooked anything in their life, basically, eats hot dogs and macaroni and cheese together for a meal most of the time, come in and then critique. I think as a chef, you're probably going to be less likely to receive that.
Yes.
Not saying that it won't, but you have somebody that goes, that was an incredible meal, and then you have somebody else that goes, that tasted awful.
Yeah.
And
I think it's probably important to clarify. I don't know. I just feel because these conversations can land so weird with so many different people.
Yeah.
Talking specifically, because I like your analogies, talking specifically when people give critique on the technicalities maybe of how we do stuff and why we do stuff. Not in terms of
theology or
I was going to say,
orthodoxy.
I don't care what quote unquote credentials you have. If somebody broke and walks in this place and leaves and says they weren't loved well, that matters.
Yes, for sure.
If anybody walks in, regardless of they've ever been to church before or not, regardless of anything they know, regardless of whatever place they are in life, if they walk away and don't feel loved, don't feel cared for, don't feel valued, that will bother me. Because you're a human being, and our whole goal is to help people.
Yeah.
But in terms of like when but if it's a longtime church person that walks in and wants to give a critique on the volume. Wants to give a critique on you guys do,
and even just to qualify. The stuff that like I'm talking about here is not because people criticize us.
Yeah.
None of this is actually about us. Mm-hmm. It's just more of this like feeling that I've had for a while that I guess the term you use is more like a critical spirit. I feel like there are a lot more people that are, I want to say, inside the church world. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying they're all leading churches necessarily, ministry, that just think it's cool or okay to have an overly critical spirit toward the church. Like the church is the problem. The church is messed up. The church is not redeemable. The church is fading away. I mean, you know how many times I've heard that from people that are close to me, whatever, the church is a mess. The church is this. The church has got to get back to its roots. Yeah. The church has got to we need revival because the church is just as dead as the rest of the world. The church is just as bad as the secular culture. It's like, I'm looking around going, man, I don't think we're quite like that. Like, I'm not saying that we're perfect, but I'm just like,
can I?
Yeah, I don't know.
Can I tell you what I think bothers you?
What bothers me?
This is like what's I feel like crystallizing in my mind as you talk.
Okay, help me out, counselor.
You know how if somebody's been, can I go back a little bit to what we talked about last week? There's a difference between someone that's been fighting racism for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And has the scars to prove it. Mm-hmm. And has, can I just even say street cred?
Yeah.
That they've been in battle. Mm-hmm. And they, out of depth and experience, speak to reform.
Yeah.
There's but when that person's voice gets inside a 17-year-old behind a camera who's not sacrificed, but who takes up that same mantle.
Yeah.
When that happens in the church world.
Yeah.
When the spirit of a prophet gets in the hands of an amateur, to
Yeah.
throw stones
Yeah.
at people
Yeah.
when they're not even in the trenches. That's what bothers you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean,
because here's the thing. Here's where me and you were. I don't know if we're different in this, but we've talked a lot about this offline.
Mm-hmm.
I may be slightly more masochistic than you.
Yeah. You don't mind it.
I there's an old soul in me that has always read the Raven Hills. I remember, when I remember reading Tozer's forward in Lena Ravenhill's Why Revival Tarries.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Yep.
Tozer said from time to time when reformers come along, they're not interested in what's working well. All they get,
Sure.
they're sent into the factory to find the breakdown of the machinery, and they're a nuisance. And that's what the prophets were. And he said, and he was really condoning, or not condoning, he was putting his stamp of approval
Yeah.
on Ravenhill. He said this. He said, I don't feel like most books come from above, but I feel like this one does because I feel like the spirit of the author does, and I feel like he was sent. And I think I don't know, maybe an unhealthy place of wanting to be abused.
Well, I think there's a level that
I've
somebody
always
that
read very
garners
convicting.
somebody that garners that kind of respect. I think amongst pastors and churches, I think that kind of voice is needed. It's kind of like, I'll give you an example of someone I would say modern. If you were to have, hey, your phone. If you were to, or your watch. If you were to have, I'm just gonna throw out a name. Someone like Rick Warren. Give his level of, let's just say, I want to say it in a nice way, rebuke to pastors. I think that a majority of pastors, even if they didn't agree with him theologically and all of that, I think there's a level where you respect him because he pastored for over 40 years and has influenced the church at large, even globally. Like, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of respect for that. It's hard to take criticism. What's interesting is you don't, and I'm not saying we don't need people like Ravenhill to do stuff like that. What's interesting is that people like Rick Warren are probably the ones who champion what's happening in the church more than they criticize what's happening in the church. But then you have other people, and again,
but would you say that's part of that's wiring and calling? Because I mean,
Maybe.
not to get all spiritual.
Sure.
You got the fivefold ministry, right?
Sure.
Pastor, teacher, evangelist, teacher, prophet. The past, we're getting really spiritual. But the pastor, shepherd, ring finger, he's just in covenant relationship, helping, championing, cheering. Prophet always has the pointer finger. They're pointing out where we need to repent. They're pointing at judgment starts at the house of God. They're pointing out, I don't know. Could that be some of it? Is a different calling, wiring?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I mean, there is probably, there's a level of that. I think maybe we're just the time and age of where we are. I think it's really hard to identify who is respected as a prophet today's day. I think that's really hard to, I just think it's, most of the people, and we know somebody that would say this, most of the people who are self-claimed prophets, we're not going to listen to almost any of them.
Sure.
That's the hard thing is you got, it's like the evangelist. It's super easy at times to be able to blow into a place and say whatever you want, cause a lot of trouble, and then walk out the back door and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the pastor there is trying to figure out, how do I help people become disciples? How do I help people that are broken? I think some of it is maybe the tension that exists in that type of, I don't know. I mean, there are people like,
but there are pastors, like full-time pastors,
Yes.
that have more of a prophetic
I
gift.
agree. And I think that I can respect that. I think I have a hard time respecting people who are not in the trenches, who are self-claimed evangelists, who are self-claimed prophets, self-claimed apostles. You're an apostle because you have started, it's like, yes, and there are people like, we'll just use some names of people we know. We've already thrown out one church, like, Craig
But you
Rochelle.
at least have the...
Craig Rochelle has started an incredible ministry that is like, has churches that are multiplying like rabbits, that, and he has a gift and a skill in that. I don't ever necessarily look at Craig Rochelle as probably being a prophet, as speaking prophetically to pastors and churches, although at times he does, I think, in his leadership and what he does. And then there are other people that I think, I'll give you an example, and I know there's kind of controversial a little bit theologically in this, but someone like Bishop T.D. Jakes. Okay? If it's someone like him, speaks something, I think, kind of prophetically about the church or whatever, well, I'm going to respect the fact that he's been pastoring for how long? The Potter's, preaches. He knows the challenges of leading a church, knows what it's like dealing with leading a broken
He's watched
culture.
the different waves and iterations of decades.
Like I'm just saying, I respect that. And then you have other pastors that just kind of like, I don't know, I want to say there's been a couple of them that just quit.
Okay.
A couple of them.
Peasy, are you listening to this?
That's only one of them. There's a couple of them that quit. Their churches, you know, also I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a couple pastors that have quit.
And that's fair. They're still serving the church.
Oh, they're criticizing. I mean, they're serving the church.
No,
You're correct. They are
serving
traveling
the church.
around and
They're not even
preaching.
traveling.
They're not well.
They
Okay,
demoted themselves.
Well, one of them is not writing books and still preaching. One of them. I'm talking about a different one now.
Okay.
But it's like the whole. Okay, here's what it feels like with a couple of them. I'm trying. I just don't want to name names. I don't want to. I read some of their books.
You're outraged.
Like.
You're outraged.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to make a point. I'm trying to say something that I think I'm not the only one that feels this way. That isn't being said. I've heard this from some other pastors as well, and that was kind of like, oh, you feel that way? To some extent, I understand. I think what it is that you have some pastors that were in environments, and rather than seek to change their environment and create, we have moved things because I feel so passionately about the church and the way it is, and do that. It was more like, yeah, I'm going to step away and not even start another church, not even whatever and which is, again, still a very hard thing to do. I have a lot of respect for people.
The one person I think you're talking about did do that.
Yes.
For years and years and years and years. Still demoted themselves, still felt like they were obeying God by stepping aside.
Sure.
And has talked about replanting a church.
Yeah. And that'd be great. In the meantime, has been awfully critical over the years. For the last decade has at times been,
I disagree.
I disagree with your disagreement. It has been at times critical, not overly critical. And I'm not even saying that the other person that we're talking about, it just feels weird because we're doing a whole lot of names that nobody is like we don't want to name names because
you're talking about Billy Graham.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, tell me the truth. You at least have respect for people that may not be in the trenches, but have the courage to confront through blogging.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, and I'm not saying that I can't learn because I'm reading one of their books.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will read their books. I do think that there is some value in it. Let me point, and then if anybody wants to ask us individually, because I'd be curious other people's take, but a lot of people don't know. So one particular leadership podcast that we both enjoy, time to time follow, interviewed a former pastor who was a well-known author. Who still is, well-known author, and who, over a series of kind of pulling back, stepped away from pastorate, now lives and I'm not even going to say where, but is basically just focused more on writing.
Lives in Kansas.
Yeah, okay. And focused more on writing and what he really believes strongly about what it means to follow Jesus. And his writing and his stuff, I really do. I do like. I think his books have been very good. I've read at least 3 or 4 of his books, and his content is good. I don't want to take away from that at all. I don't. But in this particular interview, knowing the majority of your audience is pastors,
which you loved most of his interview.
I did. I actually really appreciated part of his interview, but there was part of it that just felt like a slight on larger churches. Like, we can't really become a disciple of Jesus in a large church. We can't really fulfill almost like Jesus' calling in a large church. And maybe that's not exactly the language, but that is definitely how it came across, especially with my other friends, and I brought it up, and some of them wouldn't even listen to the rest of the interview.
Which I think is sad. I mean that respectfully. I think that's sad.
Yeah.
And me and you disagreed on this because I did not take that from what he said at all.
Yeah, I'm not the only one who did think that it was a little bit of a slight, like, I don't think he maybe didn't intend it, but it was a little bit like, well, churches there are just designed where, look at it, all the chairs are faced around a pulpit or around a single stage. One person. And that's not, almost like that's not the picture of church. And, there's a variety of like just things like that are said. And I just found it off-putting. I'm like, here's what I thought. It's like, I think you actually have a really good message. I think you're losing your audience and you don't even realize it. You might be exciting your other portion of your audience that maybe if they lead a smaller church, they feel vindicated, they feel validated. If they, a medium-sized church, you did this. But I know the audience, a lot of people who are listening to this person's podcast. I'm like, you're also alienating a lot of people who don't want to hear your message because you're coming across as being critical. And almost it was like a stigma. Here's what it is. We're dancing around it a lot, but I feel like we have to constantly fight. And it's not just this. I hear it too when we have to constantly fight against the stigma of what a larger church is like. Like it's, again, I threw one out a couple weeks ago in a message running to a guy who's a part of our church. And he's like, I defended you, pastor, the other day. I was like, what, you did? Okay, I didn't know I needed to defend. Thank you. He's like, yeah, I was telling my friend about coming to church. I was like, I ain't going to that large church. Large churches, all they care about is money. He's like, you don't know this pastor. You don't know what he's like. And when they started the church, they had 11 people. Yeah. And it wasn't about money. And it's never been about money. But I feel like that is a constant stigma that sometimes these voices or these, again, we have some family members and friends of like people on staff that, we are always talking in conversations, our staff and their family members, and I think that is just feeds this. That's, I think, the real pain is that feeds the stigma of the people that we are trying to reach in our communities.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people in other churches, but it feeds the stigma. It's like large churches are impersonal. Well, we care very much about being very personal. Like I remember what's so ironic about this is I remember the church that I used to go to back in the 90s. They had about 150 people and could never grow for a variety of reasons as I look back on it. But I remember one time they would have guests come and nobody would really stay. And I remember one time they were like, we need to find out why people weren't staying. So they called and asked people who came but never stayed and whatever. Why do you go? And like, I remember them saying like across the board, one of the primary reasons why was they said they felt like an outsider. There was 150 people. They felt like an outsider. They came in and felt like everybody had their people and it was a clique and we couldn't get in and they didn't stay.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful. That's almost never something we hear.
Yeah.
At our church. I think in larger
We're
churches,
obsessed about finding
I think in
people
large
that are-
churches, I almost think that is something you'll never hear.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's a stigma of large churches, and I just want to be like, hey, I just wish you'd have said really nice things about us 20 years ago when we had 23 people. And nobody was taking a salary.
So
You know what I mean? And it's like, if you are...
what do you think it is? Why do you think people take shots at large churches?
Well, I think what you said, tall poppy syndrome, right? It's easy to take it's like when somebody gets a church building, then all of a sudden to get to build a building, it's all about the building. No, it's not all about the building. I mean, it's like, I just think it's easy. I mean, people, maybe I will say in the past, there have been, I think, bad leaders at times that I think have, sometimes they kind of cloud a little bit of how people view the church. I think, I don't know. It goes back to, you could put this in almost in a similar category. I don't want to lump this together because this is real, but, just even like church hurt, there's always a little bit of a perspective thing on church hurt. There are some people who have been hurt by churches, and that's small and large, right? I would say more people who have been hurt by large churches simply because of the ratio of the numbers of people.
Yeah.
Like you have more people in your church, you have more of a chance to hurt more people.
Right.
But I also think from my seat, and I know we've not always done things right, and I know there's people that will say they've been hurt by our church before, but I've also had people walk through a lot of those scenarios and go, you did the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So there's people that carry church hurt, but it wasn't because we were mean or
I also think
vicious and vindictive, or we just didn't like them or didn't want to do this, but there was a disagreement, and maybe theologically there's a disagreement on behavior, and we had to, no, you can't, be in this role or position as long as you're doing this, and then all of a sudden, who are you to judge? But you know what I mean? Next thing you know, I got church hurt. And I'm not saying that's every scenario, and there is real church hurt. I do know that. I'm not trying to downplay or minimize that.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm rambling.
No,
I'm rambling
it's
today.
good. And the truth is, and I also told you this in private. I mean, I've given my life to the local church for 20 years. And I've moved states for the calling of the local church and left family and left, but it's been a joy and a privilege. But, and I've even had the role of interim pastor a couple times. But there is a seat you sit in and a weight you carry. And I know this enough because I've just been really close. I've had the privilege of being really close to a lot of senior pastors. And there's a weight the senior pastors carry that no one fully understands. And so no one can fully understand why it'd be frustrating when, and I think too, I do feel like, this is probably true for every organization. This is hopefully nobody takes this as a pity party. Why us?
Sure.
But I think maybe, especially in the church, even more than any organization, it's assumed that things are not thought through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that like, I don't want to even, dear God, bring up Pipe and Drape, but just like different little conversations, and people just disagree with. It's preference stuff, especially.
Yeah.
The people are like, why? And I'm like, do you realize that when this doesn't mean we're always right.
Sure.
We'll make plenty of wrong decisions. We've made plenty. We've missed it plenty of times. We'll continue to miss it plenty of times. But I do think people would be shocked at how much things are thought through, pros and cons weighed, wisdom sought out, prayer prayed before decisions have been made and made with an intentionality.
Yeah.
This is okay. I'm going to give you a really stupid, fun example. You sent me an Instagram reel the other day. Do you remember what it was?
No, which one?
Well, you sent me a lot.
I do. You don't get half of them. Be glad your name is not Zach Brown or Hunter McGonigal or Chance Meadows, because they get all the sports ones.
But someone sent me the other day, and you sent it to me too. It's this this older lady who is just who's saying, I don't know who started this. Who started this foolishness of
turn to your neighbor
and say blah 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 blah, and like, I mean, and so someone sent it to me before you sent it to me.
Oh, that's funny.
And
I just knew you'd get a kick out of it.
Oh, I did. And here's the thing: I feel like we're kind of in the middle as far as larger churches. We're kind of in the middle when it comes to that. Do you ever do that?
On occasion.
You'll do it on occasion.
I don't do it a ton.
The Stephen Furtick kind of churches, it's like every other second.
Yeah.
I'll go whole messages and never do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like once every 3 or 4 times I host.
Yeah, you'll do it.
I'll do it on big days like Easter.
Yeah.
Turn somebody in. And then occasionally when I preach, I'll do it. Sometimes I won't at all. Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Not everyone loves it.
Sure.
And not everyone has to love it.
Yeah.
People can like what they like.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And they just don't play along usually.
They just don't play along.
Yeah.
My petty annoyance comes when people have almost like a moral objection to it, as if I've not thought through why I do that.
Right.
So I actually told somebody,
Sure.
I said, this whole thing of like turning it, I said, it's not just, for some preachers it may be, for me, when I have done it, it's not just been like a stupid petty hype thing.
Right.
There's a reason communicators use that. Sure. Number one is it actually does re-engage a crowd. Sometimes when engagement's low and people are zoning out, or it's or sleepy crowds, sometimes just getting people psychologically. This is why teachers use stuff like this, even in secular settings. When you get people to engage with each other, it activates your brain, it activates your energy levels. It can actually, I've watched it literally reset a room. If you can do it in a way that actually lifts people, they laugh, they have a funny like light moment. It can literally reset and rejuvenate a room. Number one. Number two, when people repeat something out loud with their mouth,
sure, it's better likely they're going to remember.
It's more likely they're going to remember. And three, and this is where, my fellow introverts hate me. Church is not a place to consume; it's a place of community to participate in, and not everybody loves that. And so I told somebody, I said, if I force you to speak to a fellow human being around you, I have done you no evil.
Oh, I can hear my introvert family members right now just saying, I still hate it and I won't do it. No, they would, but
And just,
the only one. Hey, the one caveat for this one, which is just totally off subject.
Okay.
The one caveat where I'll say where some people don't like it is when you're attending church by yourself and you're like seated there and it's like, hey, turn the person next to you and you're just, I have nobody to talk to.
But you always go, but it's always both ways, left and right.
No,
So
I
you should
know,
have
but
somebody.
I'm just saying when you don't have anybody that's near you or you're with and it's not just natural and
Yeah.
you're just, that's, but yeah, there's just some things.
Everybody's different.
There's some
I know
things that
that.
are like more preferential. And to your point, like what you were saying, I get it's probably something that I take more personally than maybe other people do. And so people listen to this, they're like, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me as much as more I feel defensive, not for me, but I feel defensive for my pastor friends. Like
Yeah.
I know their hearts.
Yeah.
Like I know how many, like just this idea is like large churches they only care about getting butts in seats. They don't care about discipleship. And I'm like, that can be further from the truth. Like we're trying to do so much so that we can help people. We just released the app. We've invested dozens of thousands of dollars. Like it's not cheap. Like you know what I mean? Like tens of thousands to create this app. And we're not the only ones that are doing this. And so it's like this, I feel like it's an uphill battle to fight through all of the, they don't really worship there. They don't go deep there. They don't, like if people actually will come there, it's because they don't preach the gospel.
Yeah.
They're attractional, but they don't actually preach the gospel.
Yeah.
I've had people who've come who kind of felt that way. I go, you actually do.
Don't you think we should?
And
have
I'm like, why would you think that we don't? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's because there's people out there that.
Don't you think we should all just have a championing spirit?
Yeah, I do. So I just need to get that off my chest today. So I know that there's always space. I don't ever think that I'm above correction or rebuke or above but I think most of the time, most of us have, I think, an inner circle of people that like we really trust and respect. Other pastoral leaders that aren't just, that I think they're like, you're off, bro. This isn't right. This isn't honoring God, and I think we need those people, but I think those are usually people we trust. I think it's just, I just don't know how to take, I guess I've just been defensive for the church. I'm in defensive posture for the church because
And these people,
I just hear
say that they're in defense posture for the church.
no.
They're fighting for the health of the church. And the healthy
yes
ones, I
and
think.
no, but okay, the healthier, yes. I don't even think that those. I don't even think like the one guy that we're talking about is even really as much about the church as it is the individual practice of following Jesus, as much as what cared about, and that it's hard for the current church models for that to happen well. Which there's a level I agree with. You know what I mean? But I think that there's I can think of plenty other people and voices where it's just more of like easy to slam the church and act like the church isn't, doing its part. And I just feel like that is just a complete dismissal of all the pastors I know of, all the people on our team, all the people who serve, who care very much about people. I mean, we have people that the amount of people that tell me how impacted they are by cards they get in the mail when they're going through something, or a friend of someone in our church who's going through something, and they submit a prayer request, and that person gets a card or two in the mail that someone mentions them by name, says that they're praying for them by name. Like the amount of care, like grief, people, we've had, families and people in our church have just had major loss. And the response I hear from you guys, this church has been amazing. Like that stuff's never highlighted. All it is the church just in general. The church is just gone backwards, and the church needs revived, and the church is dead, and the church doesn't do anything. And I'm like, come listen on a Sunday, and just, if you ignore everything else, listen to the baptism story.
Yeah.
Like, listen to somebody's life that's been impacted and has been changed.
Yeah.
Like, so I just feel like it's overly critical at times. And I don't think that I get it. There's nobody that's out championing the churches. We're all just doing our thing. And I think some people need to, if your experience or in your church has been one thing, don't assume every church and everybody's experience has been the same.
Mm-hmm.
That applies to church hurt. That
Yes.
applies to your experience at church. That applies to the preaching.
Yep.
That applies to their theology. That applies to everything. Don't just assume. And,
Yeah.
and then, just this idea, I don't know, I've also seen in some people, there's this idea of like, we should just retreat from the church and pray for and criticize the church, but aren't actively
A part of the church.
like really actively part of a local church. Mm-hmm. Do their own thing, have their own, and it's fine. I don't mind that, but it's like when you're around them and half of what is said is always critical.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, when you say that about the capital C church, are you including us in that?
Yeah.
Or are you just trying to say a generalization because we are
Right.
part of the capital C church?
Right.
And it's not perfect. The church is not perfect. And the church has plenty of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we go on forever and ever. And so it's not even the critique from the outside. It's not even maybe the critique from where there are people in churches that are doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing. Maybe that's you have to have one to get the other. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we kind of like, you I think, this is where you are one of those people that probably, you see the good in everything that they say, which is good. Like the people that I would say that we've talked about
Mm-hmm.
that kind of either step away to this and the heart of their message, and this is so beautiful, I can take that, it's that. I think I get a little bit more defensive toward people like that, even though I really do like their message and their content. I just feel like I almost want to say, from my circle of people, you're hurting your message. Mm-hmm. It's not getting out. Mm-hmm. When even if you have your own personal experience of leading a church and, you just felt like you couldn't, it felt like trapped into a church bubble where you had to operate a certain way because that's what's expected of church.
Right.
And you just go, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like that's good for my spiritual journey and for my soul. And I assume the same for other people.
Yeah.
That's fine. There are other people like you. And I think people could probably move to, I think that's why I do think that there is an importance for smaller churches. Mm-hmm. There's important for medium-sized churches and for larger churches.
Yep.
I
It's
think
almost
we're
like
all different in how we receive and what speaks to us and what helps us grow. And I think to assume one way is the right way, because that's almost the feeling I got from the conversation. One way is the right way.
It's a really bad analogy, but it's almost like how we either demonize or glorify the rich and the poor.
Yeah.
Rich are automatically good or bad. Poor people are automatically noble or bad.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're poor or rich, and whether or not you're small or large. If you're
Yeah.
small, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something right.
Yeah.
And if you're large, doesn't mean you're
Yeah.
automatically doing well.
Yeah.
You could be large and
You're
really
large
unhealthy
yeah.
and toxic.
Yep.
Or you could be large, and it could be because God's blessing you, and you have a friendly church, and you're doing things with excellence. Or, since life's so complicated, it could be a combination of all of it.
Yeah.
And all of us are works in progress.
Yeah.
All of us as individuals
Yeah.
are works in progress. All of our churches are works in
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah.
And I just think we should look at the mirror, get better, cheer others on,
Yeah.
critique less, champion more.
Yeah. And I'm not even saying some of them have been, we've lumped a lot of people together. There's people in my mind that I am close to.
Yeah.
That I have for years felt like this, like it's just like a little dig here, a little criticism here, a generalization, and then there's other people that I think we're also in our minds of people who were pastors or who have kind of a message, okay, that doesn't work. Okay, you'd think it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
But it might work for others.
Yep.
And again, not to assume motive.
Yep.
On those. And so, again, it's probably me just being a little defensive in this seat.
But you know what?
And none of it, I just want to reiterate, none of this in this conversation, I promise you, has been spurred on because of people saying directly critical things of me or our church. Mm-hmm. This has just been my observation of culturally what seems to, I don't know, what I feel and kind of seem to experience. And part of me wants to get defensive for my friends.
Yeah.
In ministry.
Yep.
Like I know them, and I know what they care about. Yep. And I know they don't just care about money, and I know they care about discipling people. Yep. And I know they care about caring for people and just want to also see the kingdom of God expand.
Yeah.
It's like, how evil.
Yeah.
You know, and almost like that there's only one way. I think it would be fun to have a conversation about that some other time too, about discipleship, but like there's only one way to disciple people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and according to your favorite author, there's no such thing as using disciple as a verb anyways.
No, you don't. Did we just give it away? Did we just give a little bit too much?
I think we should bring Peasy back on for rebuttal of part 2.
We will have to actually use names if we do that. We are trying to protect the innocent because some of them are innocent. I don't think some of them are malicious. I don't. I just think I don't understand how that phrasing, that messaging, how that kind of turns people off. Turns some of us off.
Yeah.
Not everybody. You love it. You're like, man, slap me.
And I have a lot of senior pastor friends that are not offended by this.
Sure.
I mean, I got several in different states that have embraced that stuff. Don't seem offended by it. The way it comes
I think
off.
the content's great. I don't think there's much that's been offensive in the book or content. I just think some of it's just like it's not even offensive. Offensive's a bad word. It's not even. It's just off-putting.
Yeah.
It's just like I felt like it was yet again. Here's the stereotype. Here's the stigma. Here's what we have to fight against.
And he's a little smug in his presentation.
You have to agree with that.
He is. A little smug.
And then part of me is like, okay, I just feel bad we're talking in code. And then part of me is like, you quit. And so now you're just living this.
I found out how much people hate code.
Monastic lifestyle.
Even if it's a good thing. Because when I got done speaking my last message, I talked about, one of my heroes. And I didn't say his name, and it was on purpose. Yeah. I don't know. I just felt weird to say his name. And I had so many people, you forgot to say his name. Why didn't you say his name? It was driving me crazy. I was like, so I can only imagine.
Should we just say his name? Should we say one of the guy's name? Is it bad?
Tune in for next week.
Whoa! We actually going to say it next time?
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Yeah, we will.
We will?
Yeah, because we're not bashing him.
No, I'm reading his book right now.
Yeah, I met him.
Did you? Oh, that's right. You told me on a trip.
I met him on a trip.
You met him in his new home.
No, I didn't meet him in his new home.
In his new area.
Yes, I did meet him.
No, that's his new in his new old city.
Yeah, and he was probably 15, 20 minutes. Had the most gracious conversation.
He seems like
his
an
books
amazing
have been
person.
Incredible to me.
One of his books was really profound for me 4 years ago. I'm not taking away from that. It's some of the off-putting language about the size of a church somehow equates to the quality of the discipleship.
Yep.
So we're gonna drive people crazy, but we'll maybe drop the name in the next one.
All right. Until next week, let us know your thoughts, and we will see you later. Bye.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.